The day my son poisoned the wrong cup. If you're listening to this, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about my story, my revenge story. I just want to know how far the truth has traveled, how far he made it before the lies started falling apart. Because what happened in that hospital cafeteria, that one ordinary morning, you'd never look twice at, should have killed me. And the part that still wakes me up at night, I watched my own son lift the cup meant to end my life. My name is James. I'm 60 years old, heart a little worn out back, a little stiff soul patched together with the kind of losses you can only get from loving people who don't always love you back. I'm not the dramatic type, never been. Worked with my hands for nearly 4 decades. Fixed things, built things. I always believed life made sense if you kept your head down and did the right damn thing. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the sight of my son taking a slow, easy sip from that chipped coffee cup. The cup meant for me. Let me take you straight into that moment without sugarcoating it. The cafeteria at Riverside Medical wasn't anything special, just a long echo of metal carts, antiseptic smells, and old fluorescent lights that hummed like they were tired of their job. I had just finished my routine checkup. The doctors say I'm stable, which is hospital language for you're old, but not dying fast enough to worry us. Ethan, my stepson, though I raised him as my own since he was 12, had asked to meet me for lunch. "We should talk, Dad," he'd said the night before. And isn't it funny how you don't notice red flags until you're looking back from the wreckage? I should have known. I swear to God I should have known. But that morning I came in hopeful. Only an hour earlier, I had stepped outside the hospital to answer a call from my financial advisor. He told me the final transfer had just cleared. $8 million. After taxes, after everything. Sitting in my account like it belonged there. I don't know if you've ever had a life-changing number spoken into your ear, but it does something to you. It makes the world feel a little softer, brighter. Like maybe all the crap you endured, losing my wife, Linda, losing sleep, losing years, maybe it was finally paying me back. So when I walked back to that cafeteria table and saw Ethan waiting with 2 steaming green mugs, I smiled. A simple, stupid, trusting smile. The mug on my side had a small scratch on the rim. I remember that detail. Funny how your mind records the things that almost kill you. "Dad," Ethan said. His voice was too bright, too practiced. "We've got things to celebrate." But before I could answer, my phone buzzed again, my advisor calling back to confirm paperwork. So I stepped away, leaving my coat draped over the chair like some kind of claim on safety. When I came back, it happened so fast I barely understood it. I brushed past Ethan's arm as I sat down. The table shook, the cups clattered, liquid sloshed. And in the tiny storm of napkins, apologies, and shifting mugs, the position of the cups changed. Instinct, old man. Instinct, the kind life grinds into you, made me pull the unchipped cup toward me. I didn't think, didn't question it, just moved it. Ethan didn't even look at which one he grabbed. He lifted the chipped mug, the one originally in front of me, and took a generous gulp. I remember the sound of it, the swallow, the sigh, the second sip. Then the first sign, so small you'd miss it if you weren't watching your own future twist into a nightmare, a single bead of sweat sliding down his temple. He wiped at it, blinked too hard. "You okay?" I asked. Yeah, just..." He touched his chest. "Weird. Dizzy." At first I thought maybe it was blood sugar. Stress. One of those things he never takes care of. But then his breathing quickened, shallow and sharp. His pupils widened. His hands began to shake so violently, he dropped the spoon he was holding. "Dad," he whispered like he wanted to ask for help, but was ashamed to need it. Then he choked. And I swear my heart stopped. Right there, standing over a bowl of half-eaten soup. Ethan. I grabbed him as his knees buckled. His skin had gone gray, like wet cement. Cold sweat drenched his forehead. A nurse across the room noticed and rushed over. "What did he take?" she snapped. "Nothing," I said, panicked. "We were just having coffee." She smelled the cup he had dropped, looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget. "Call a doctor. Now." A few more staff rushed over, pulling Ethan onto a gurney. Sabrina, his wife, appeared out of nowhere, screaming, crying, grabbing his shirt like she was trying to pull him back to life. But here's the thing. Her eyes didn't look scared. They looked furious. And she kept glancing at the coffee cup like it held the whole world hostage. Something inside me twisted. Hard. A thought so dark, so unbelievable, I wanted to push it away. Was that cup meant for me? Before I could speak, Sabrina lunged for the mug, snatching it off the tray. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. But a security guard, Officer Reynolds, stepped in fast, grabbing her wrist mid-motion. "Ma'am, leave the cup," he ordered. "It needs to be tested." Sabrina's face drained of color. She froze, caught between fight and flight. Then she dropped the mug like it burned her. And that's when I knew something was wrong. Something deep. Something rotten. Minutes later, they wheeled Ethan away, his body twitching, his breathing ragged. Doctors shouting, nurses running alarms, beeping, the kind of chaos you only see in the worst moments of a life. I stood there, hands shaking, feeling like the whole cafeteria had tilted sideways. Reynolds came close, his voice low and steady. "Sir, you're gonna want to come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." I stared at him, numb. "See what?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "Why, your son just drank the wrong cup." And that's when the world I thought I understood finally shook it. If I hadn't switched those cups, if instinct hadn't whispered in my ear, if the table hadn't shaken at just the right moment, I might be dead right now. If you're still here, sticking with me through this mess, thank you. It's strange, isn't it? How a moment as simple as a cup of coffee can turn into a life or death story. But none of that chaos in the cafeteria makes sense unless you understand where I came from, what I survived, and how $8 million landed in the lap of a man who never expected anything good to happen again. So let me wind the tape back. Not to bore you, God knows none of us has time to waste, but because this part matters. This is the soil all the poison grew from. I spent 38 years working as an electrician in Akron, Ohio. The kind of job that leaves scars on your knuckles and calluses on your palms. I started when I was barely 20, fresh out of a community college program I could barely afford. Back then, the only thing I really wanted was a steady paycheck and maybe a life that wasn't as hard as the one my parents had. Then I met Linda. Linda wasn't loud or flashy or the kind of woman you'd see in the movies. She was steady. She was warm. She had this way of smiling at me, like she saw who I could be, not just who I was. You don't forget a woman like that. You don't get over her either. Not really. We built our life one paycheck at a time. A little house on Maple Drive, hand-me-down furniture. 2 stepkids, Emily, who loved books, and Ethan, who loved trouble. I raised them both the best I could. Emily flourished. Ethan always seemed to run toward the fire instead of away from it. But he called me Dad, and I believed love could fix anything. Then life shifted. The first time Linda felt the chest pain, she brushed it off. The second time I drove her to the ER myself. The third time she didn't get out of the hospital again. Heart failure. Slow. Cruel. Expensive. You ever watch someone you love fade over 3 years? The hospital gowns, the beeping machines, the nights in chairs too stiff to sleep in. We drained everything, savings, retirement. The old truck I loved, even the emergency fund we swore we'd never touch. Medical bills don't ask if you are grieving. They just show up. And in the middle of all that darkness, every Saturday morning, Linda would nudge my shoulder and whisper, "Jimmy, don't forget the ticket." It became our ritual. A $2 scratch-off. Sometimes a Powerball when we felt wild. She used to joke, "We'll win big one day. Probably not in my lifetime, but you'll get your turn." I'd laugh, thinking it was just one more silly superstition to keep us hopeful. She died on a rainy Thursday in March. I held her hand until it went cold. And for the next year, I swear the house felt like a tomb. But every Saturday, I still bought the damn lottery ticket. Not because I expected anything. Not because I believed in luck. But because scratching that little silver square made me feel like she was sitting beside me again, whispering jokes, telling me life wasn't done with me yet. Then came that winter morning. The cold had that bite only Ohio knows, sharp enough to make your bones complain. I'd just made a pot of coffee. The good kind, the stuff Linda always said was too fancy for blue-collar folks like us. And as the steam fogged the kitchen window, I scratched the ticket absent-mindedly. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Powerball, 11. At first I thought I'd misread. I put on my glasses, checked again, then pulled out my phone to check the website. The numbers lined up like fate was finally clocking in for work. I won. $8 million. I sat in that silent kitchen, holding a $2 miracle, and all I could think was, Linda, you're missing this. I didn't scream or dance or run outside shouting like you see in the commercials. I just cried. Quietly. Old man tears, the kind that don't fall to the floor, but stay trapped in your eyes, burning. The next few weeks felt like someone had swapped my life with a stranger's. Lawyers, financial advisors, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. People suddenly remembering they always cared for me. And this is where things start to matter. Emily was the first person I told. She drove across town, hugged me so hard my ribs squeaked, and said, "Dad, you deserve some light after everything." She meant it. You can't fake the kind of love she gives. Ethan, on the other hand, when I called him, he sounded like he'd been waiting for the news. Overexcited. Too sweet. Too eager. "Dad, this is incredible. We need to celebrate. It's a sign, Dad, a real chance for us. You know, I've got some ideas for investments. We could build something big together." It was the same tone he used when he was a teenager, trying to convince me to co-sign his first car. And just like then, something about it didn't sit right. But grief makes you soft. And guilt makes you stupid. So I let him back in. I let both him and Sabrina smile, and pat my shoulder, and pretend like we were a family stitched tight. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't have understood, was that money doesn't change people. It unfusks them, exposes their hunger, their fear, their greed, their belief that your life belongs to them. I thought $8 million would fix something in all of us. Instead, it cracked the ground beneath my feet and showed me the rot that had been growing under my own roof for years. And that road, the one paved with good intentions and blind trust, led straight to the hospital cafeteria, where my son lifted the cup meant to kill me. But you already saw how that turned out. And trust me, the worst was still coming. You'd think $8 million would make people happy for you, proud even. But the truth is, money doesn't just change the way people look at you, it changes the way they look at themselves. And when someone already feels small, insecure, or drowning, money isn't a blessing to them. It's bait. The first person to show up after the news broke wasn't my daughter Emily. She came later, quiet and gentle like always. No. The first knock on my door came barely 40 minutes after I called my kids. It was Ethan. He stood there on my porch, wearing that big toothy grin he used to flash when he wanted something as a boy. Only now it looked different, too sharp around the edges, like it was cutting him from the inside. "Dad," he said, arms wide, hugging me like a long-lost friend, instead of a son who hadn't visited in months. When he stepped back, he scanned the house slowly, like he was taking inventory of what would be replaced first with lottery money. That glance alone made something old and tired shift inside me. "You look good," he said too loudly. "You look rich." I forced a smile. "Still the same guy, Ethan." He nodded but didn't believe me. I could see it. Money does that. It makes folks rewrite your character in their heads, even if you haven't changed one damn bit. Before I could even offer him coffee, he said, "Sabrina's in the car. She wants to see you. We were thinking celebration dinner tonight, somewhere nice." Somewhere nice turned out to be the Riverstone, a place I'd only ever driven past, because the menu prices looked like medical bills. Sabrina walked through the restaurant doors like she owned the building. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my first truck. Her hair, perfect smile, perfect attitude, perfect in that way. People learn when they realize charm is a weapon. "James," she said as she kissed my cheek. "Congratulations. Linda would be so happy for you." She mentioned Linda's name like it was a key she could twist in my chest. I felt it. God help me, I felt it. We sat at a corner table overlooking the river. Candlelight flickered between us, and some moody jazz version of an Elvis song played overhead, the kind of atmosphere designed to loosen wallets and tighten trust. The waiter brought wine before I even asked, and Ethan raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. I didn't clink mine. I just nodded. Almost immediately, he launched in. "So, Dad, you know how I've been working on real estate developments. Well, Sabrina and we've been talking about something that could be huge, life-changing. A real family investment. Family. That word again. Funny how people drag family out only when they want money, forgiveness, or both." Sabrina leaned forward, placing her hand over mine. Her nails sparkled like tiny daggers. "What Ethan is trying to say," she cooed, "is that we found an incredible opportunity downtown. A commercial building. Perfect location. And with your blessing and, well, your new financial freedom, we could renovate it, flip it, and triple your investment." My gut tightened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. I'd heard this tone before, back when Ethan was 17 and begged me to co-sign a loan for a car he couldn't afford. Back when he was 23 and wanted me to help cover his credit card debt just until he got on his feet. Back when Linda whispered late at night, "Jimmy, be careful with him. He loves you, but he loves shortcuts more." I cleared my throat. I appreciate the thought. But no, I already have a financial plan. I'm not jumping into any property deals. Ethan's face tightened. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Disappointment mixed with entitlement. An expression that said he wasn't used to no. And he wasn't planning to accept it. Sabrina, though, she didn't flinch. She just adjusted the diamond on her wrist and smiled slow and calculated. "I understand," she said softly. "Losing Linda, it must still be hard. And now having all this money, maybe it feels overwhelming. That's why family is so important." Her voice wrapped around Linda's name, like a snake coiling around a memory. "You know," she continued, tilting her head, "Linda always said you two dreamed of retiring somewhere warm, somewhere peaceful. Wouldn't she want you to enjoy this with the people she loved?" I stared at her. For a second, I swear the restaurant evaporated. It was just me, Linda's memory, and this woman, using my wife's ghost as leverage. My jaw clenched. "Don't speak for Linda." Sabrina blinked just once, but her smile didn't drop. It only thinned, becoming a sharper version of politeness. Ethan jumped in, trying to lighten the tone. "Look, Dad, we're just saying it's smart business. And you trust me, right? That word again. Trust. Funny how people who break it the most are the ones who repeat it like a hymn. No, I said. I trust my advisor. And I trust Emily. That's enough. Ethan leaned back, wounded pride turning his voice brittle. You don't trust me. Your own son, you're my son, I corrected quietly. That doesn't automatically make you trustworthy. Sabrina's fork paused midair. She tried to hide the flicker of anger in her eyes, but it flashed like a lighthouse warning of incoming storms. After that, dinner turned cold. Not the food, the atmosphere. Ethan sulked. I stayed quiet. Sabrina smiled her plastic smile, the kind you know isn't really a smile at all, just a mask people wear when the monster underneath isn't ready to show its teeth. When dessert came, cheesecake drizzled with raspberry, they declined, claiming they were watching calories. I didn't believe it. I think bitterness ruins appetite more than sugar ever could. As we stood to leave, Sabrina squeezed my arm. Soft, warm, deadly. We're family, James. We'll talk again. These chances, they don't come twice. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. But it wasn't kindness either. And the smile she gave me, thin, sharp, glinting like a blade, just before its use, told me one thing I'd been too blind to see. They weren't asking for my money. They were circling it. And circling me. Like predators testing the strength of an old man's bones. I wish I could tell you that dinner at the Riverstone was the end of it, that Ethan and Sabrina took the hint, backed off, and let me breathe. But greed doesn't leave quietly. It lingers. It circles. It tightens its grip the moment you look away. And in the weeks after that dinner, their presence didn't fade. It multiplied. It started small, the way storms always do. 3 days after our dinner, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man with a thick accent asked, "Is this the residence of Ethan Harper? We need to verify some outstanding balances, CC is." I hung up before he finished. Something cold pooled in my chest. I didn't want to pry, but life has a funny way of forcing your hand. 2 days later, I ran into Tom Mitchell, an old co-worker, who now runs a small contracting business. He pulled me aside at the hardware store. "Hey, James," didn't want to say anything. "But your boy Ethan, he owes me 12 grand. Been dodging calls. Last I heard, he borrowed from some private lenders. Not the legal kind." Those words hit harder than any punch I took in my younger years. Debt is one thing. Desperation is another. Desperation mixed with entitlement. That's gasoline waiting for a spark. And Sabrina, sweet smiling. Sabrina had sparks in her eyes the night we had dinner. A few evenings later, something strange began happening. Around 9 p.m., I stepped out to toss the trash and noticed an SUV parked across the street. Windows tinted dark, engine off. No movement inside. I watched it longer than I should have, feeling silly for being suspicious. I'm a 60-year-old man with a heart problem. Paranoia isn't uncommon. So I shrugged it off. But the next night, the SUV was back. And the night after that. Same spot. Same shadows. The third night, I scribbled down the license plate, though I wasn't sure what I'd do with it. Call the cops and say what a car is sitting legally on a public street. I'd sound like a lonely old man with too much time to think. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling whatever was happening around me was no coincidence. Meanwhile, Ethan found new ways to invade my day. He started calling every morning. Always cheerful. Always with some idea he wanted to share. "Dad, what if we buy 2 duplexes in Highland Square? The rental income alone. Dad, I have this friend who flips medical buildings. Dad, what if you just loan me a small portion of your winnings? Just for a product project. Just seed money." I said no every single time. Politely at first. Firmly after the 5th call. Coldly after the 10th. Then came the emails. Spreadsheets. PowerPoints, links to properties I had zero interest in, a full family business plan he and Sabrina had drawn up, complete with a logo and a tagline that made me cringe. Harper & Son Development Building. Tomorrow. Together. Together. Right. I didn't reply. Not to any of them. Some messages he sent at 2 a.m., clearly written after a few drinks, typos, long rambles, guilt-tripping lines like, "You owe me this. You raised me. Why won't you help me? Mom would have said yes." That one hurt. A low blow in the middle of the night. But the final straw wasn't a call or an email. It was Emily. She visited one Saturday morning. Didn't call ahead, just knocked once and let herself in. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to talk." She sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers twisted together, the way she used to do when she was little, and about to tell me she broke a vase or failed a test. "Ethan's in trouble," she finally said. "I heard things through a friend who works at a credit union. Sabrina's been flagged in 2 different financial investigations." My stomach tightened. "What kind of investigations?" "The fraud kind," she whispered. I looked out the window. The SUV wasn't there that morning, but the absence didn't comfort me. Emily reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Dad, they're not just stressed. They're drowning. And drowning people. They pull others down with them." I swallowed hard. "He's my son, Em." She shook her head gently. "Dad, love doesn't cancel consequences. You can love him, but you also have to protect yourself." She wasn't lecturing. She was pleading. I stared at her face, Linda's eyes, my stubborn jawline. The daughter who never asked for anything, never guilted me, never turned love into leverage. In that moment, the contrast hit me so hard it stole my breath. "How long have you known?" I asked. "A while. I didn't want to worry you until I had enough details. But Dad, Ethan is not stable right now. And Sabrina, she scares me." I felt that same cold pool forming in my chest again. She wasn't wrong. Something about Sabrina always felt too polished, like a knife hidden in a glass case. Pretty to look at, deadly to touch. "Dad," Emily whispered, "promise me you won't give them money. Not a penny. And if anything feels wrong, call me. Immediately." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Love, especially the kind that stretches over years of raising a boy who wasn't yours, does strange things to your spine. Turns steel into rubber. But I didn't tell Emily that. She already carried enough worry for both of us. When she hugged me goodbye, I closed my eyes and wished to God she was wrong. That Ethan wasn't sinking. That Sabrina wasn't dangerous. That the SUV wasn't watching me like prey. But deep down, down in the part of my gut, Linda always told me to trust. I knew Emily was right. Something was coming. And it wasn't good. When the door shut behind her, the house fell into a silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. And for the first time since winning that damn lottery, I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. I'm going to take you right back into that cafeteria, not the calm retelling you heard earlier, but how it actually felt in the moment. Raw. Confusing. Like the world tilted sideways and didn't bother warning me first. Because when Ethan picked up the wrong cup, the one he meant for me, I didn't know any of that yet. All I saw was my son's face turning gray, the panic building behind his eyes, and the sound of the mug hitting the table with a hard ceramic thud that still echoes in my head. It all happened so damn fast. At first, Ethan just rubbed his forehead like he was fighting a headache. Then his knees trembled, and his eyes unmazed like he was staring at something miles behind me. A drop of sweat slid down his cheek, then another, faster than seemed natural. "Ethan," I said, leaning forward. "You all right?" He didn't answer. He tried, but the word got stuck in his throat. His lips parted, but nothing came out. just a broken breath. Then the shaking started. His right hand jerked, knocking the spoon from his fingers. It clattered onto the plastic tray. He reached for the table edge, trying to steady himself, but his body betrayed him, arms twitching, legs folding like bad scaffolding. "Dad," he choked. One word, barely a whisper. But I heard something behind it, fear. Real fear. I shot to my feet. "Somebody. I need a nurse over here." Chairs scraped. People turned. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The whole cafeteria shifted into that strange collective hush that only appears right before chaos. And that's when Sabrina rushed in. She must have been waiting nearby too, conveniently nearby, because she came sprinting from the hallway, heels clacking like gunshots. "What's happening, Ethan?" she screamed, dropping to her knees like she'd practiced the move. Her mascara was perfect. Her panic wasn't. She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him harder than she should have. "Baby, talk to me. Talk to me." His body jerked violently in response, and she let out a wail that sounded rehearsed, like a soundtrack cue she'd been holding on to. Then her eyes flicked to me. For a split second, one sharp slicing second, the panic on her face wasn't fear. It was fury. Not at Ethan. At me. Like I had messed up some plan I didn't even know I was part of. A nurse barreled toward us. "What did he consume?" Sabrina pointed at the cafeteria food, rambling fast. "A sandwich, a chicken sandwich, and he didn't eat breakfast, and he's under stress. He just needs rest, he just—" But her eyes kept flicking toward the table. Toward the mugs. Specifically, the chipped mug. The one Ethan had drunk from. The one meant for me. Before I could answer the nurse, Sabrina lunged fast. Desperate, grabbing the chipped mug with shaking hands. "What are you doing?" I barked. I need— this is nothing, it's just coffee. He didn't. He wouldn't." Her words tripped over themselves like they were fleeing her mouth. But she didn't lift that cup because she was worried. She lifted it because she wanted it gone. She knew exactly what was in it. She knew exactly what it meant. And she knew that cup was her entire future, her freedom, her lies, her plan, all sitting there in plain sight, still warm from Ethan's lips. Before she could run, a firm hand clamped around her wrist. Officer Reynolds. I'd seen him dozens of times at the hospital. Middle-aged, steady eyes, retired military. The kind of man who didn't flinch unless the building was on fire. I always nodded at him. He always nodded back. Just two tired men, acknowledging each other's existence. But now he wasn't nodding. "Ma'am," he said in that low, controlled voice trained for tense situations. "Put the cup down." Sabrina jerked her arm. "Let go of me. My husband is sick. I'm trying to help him. That's not helping." Reynolds gently twisted the mug from her grip and set it on the tray out of her reach. "That cup needs to be tested." Her face drained white, completely white, like the blood ran backward inside her body. "That's ridiculous," she shrieked. "It's coffee, just coffee." Reynolds didn't blink. "Then you shouldn't mind if the lab checks it." For the first time since she entered the room, her panic became real. Not compassion, not fear for Ethan. Fear of exposure. And I felt a wind cut through me, cold, invisible, undeniable. Something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, Ethan's condition had fallen off a cliff. His arms tightened against his chest. His back arched. His jaw clenched so hard I worried his teeth would break. His breathing became a rapid, shallow flutter, the way trapped birds beat themselves blind, trying to escape small space. The nurse lifted his eyelid. His pupil swallowed the blue of his iris completely. "Seizure," as she shouted. "Get a gurney now." The next moments blurred, an explosion of motion, voiced, barking orders, the metallic rattle of wheels racing toward us. They lifted Ethan onto the gurney. Sabrina collapsed into hysterics. Big screams, shaking hands, but she kept cutting glances at me. Sharp, accusing. as if this were my doing. They pushed Ethan toward the ER doors, but before they disappeared, he looked at me just for a second, eyes wide and terrified. And damn it, he looked like a little boy again. The same boy who once hid behind me during thunderstorms. The same boy who asked me to check monsters in the closet. Then he was gone. The swinging ER doors swallowed him whole. And suddenly the whole cafeteria, the whole world fell silent. People stared. Nurses whispered. Someone dropped a fork. And there I stood, an old man, frozen in the middle of a nightmare, realizing I was the only person who didn't understand what had just happened. Officer Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Sir, you didn't hear this from me yet. But something's off about your son. About his wife." I swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" He hesitated, eyes narrowing just a touch. "I think you should come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." "What is it?" He looked at the cups, then at the hallway where Ethan disappeared, then back at me. Evidence. A chill went down my spine, and before I could ask another question, he motioned for me to follow. My hands trembled, my heart hammered, because deep down, though I didn't want to believe it, I already knew whatever he was about to show me was going to change everything. Reynolds didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed. He walked with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who'd carried bad news before, combat tours, ER fights, overdoses in the parking lot, the whole human circus. He knew how to move when the truth was about to gut someone. "Sir," he said, motioning me toward a side hallway away from the cafeteria windows, "I want you to brace yourself." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like something was gripping it from the inside. We stopped near an alcove behind the vending machines. He checked the corners as if making sure no one followed. No doctors, no nurses, no Sabrina. Then he pulled out his phone. "You need to see this," he said quietly. The tone in his voice, I'd heard it before. The day the doctor told me Linda wasn't going to walk out of that hospital. That same careful mix of dread and duty. He unlocked the screen, opened a video file, turned the phone so I could see. And I swear, my heartbeat shook the inside of my ribs. The footage was grainy black and white, shot from the security camera in the cafeteria. I watched myself walk away from the table, phone pressed to my ear. I remembered that moment, exactly, something ordinary, something harmless. Then Sabrina slid into view. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't even pretending yet. She was calm. Too calm. Her purse rested on her lap. She reached inside with a practiced hand, like she'd rehearsed this part a dozen times. What she pulled out wasn't a wallet, wasn't makeup, wasn't a phone. It was a tiny plastic packet, clear, filled with a fine powder, like crushed chalk. My chest tightened. "Watch," Reynolds murmured. Sabrina glanced around, quick flicks of her eyes, to see who was watching. Then she slid the packet under the table to Ethan, who took it like he'd been waiting. No hesitation, no fear, no guilt, just cold efficiency. He opened it, tilted it, poured the contents directly into the chipped mug, the one that belonged to me. He stirred it with the plastic stirrer, cool as a surgeon, prepping for a routine procedure. Then he looked up, right toward the hallway I'd disappeared into. And he smiled. Not a warm smile, not a nervous smile. A smile like someone who'd already spent the money he thought he'd inherit. Sabrina touched his wrist. A tiny gesture. An affirmation. A sealant way of saying, "This is it. Do it. Stick to the plan." My stomach turned so hard I had to steady myself against the wall. And that Reynolds whispered, tapping the screen. I stopped her from taking the cup. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My throat was gravel. Ethan stared down at the cup, tapping it once with his finger, before sliding it carefully into my spot, just to make sure the switch stuck. Then I reappeared in the frame returning from my call. Reynolds paused the footage right there. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. My hands were trembling so violently, I had to shove them into my pockets to hide it. That powder, I finally choked out. Was it? Not lethal, he said. Not in a normal adult with no complications. But in someone your age on blood pressure meds. Could have dropped your heart rate so low, you'd pass out. Maybe worse. I felt the wall behind me, and leaned, trying to find balance in a world that suddenly felt tilted. Reynolds hesitated before continuing. Sir, I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I've dealt with Sabrina before. My head jerked up. What do you mean, dealt with her? He scratched his jaw, a gesture full of resentment, like even saying her name left a bad taste. 3 years ago, she was investigated in a Medicare fraud case. Fake claims, fake prescriptions, a whole pile of dirty paperwork. Charges got dropped because a witness disappeared, but she's not the innocent wife she pretends to be. The hallway felt smaller, hotter, harder to breathe. She knows how to get drugs, he added. Knows how to manipulate the system. This kind of sedative. She'd have no trouble getting her hands on it. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since Linda died, I felt truly awesome. Not lonely as emptiness. This was different. This was betrayal, an echo that rattles your bones, not your heart. My son, the boy. I raised the boy, I fed and clothed the boy I sat next to during school conferences and graduation, and the funeral home, when he cried into my shirt after his mother died, had just tried to poison me, to steal my money, my life, my trust, everything. Reynolds must have seen my chest tightening because he placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Sir, he said gently, I'm real sorry, but I need to ask something important. I swallowed hard. What do you want me to call the police, or do you want to handle this another way? For a second, just one, I wished I hadn't switched those cups. I wished I still didn't know. I wished ignorance could wrap around me like a blanket and hide this truth. But reality doesn't care what we wish. I straightened my back. My voice, shaky as it was, came out steady enough. Call them, I said. Call the police. Reynolds nodded once. And as he walked off, I stared down at the paused video still on his phone. Sabrina's hand on Ethan's wrist. Ethan looking down at the cup with ephod exposition. And me off screen walking right back into the trap without knowing. In that frozen image, grainy black and white, I saw the truth of my life as clear as the day Linda died. Money reveals who people are, but betrayal reveals who you should have never trusted. And my son had made his choice long before that cup. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. When Reynolds left to call the police, something inside me snapped loose, a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long. And before I even knew where my feet were taking me, I was pushing through the hallway past the vending machines, past the cluster of nurses whispering about the man who collapsed in the cafeteria. I wasn't heading toward the ER. Not yet. I needed answers first, answers from the one person who had them. Sabrina. I spotted her instantly storming toward the sliding hospital doors, purse clutched tight under her arm, heels stabbing the floor with each frantic step. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't even pretending to be worried. She was escaping. And I would not let her vanish into the parking lot like nothing had happened. Sabrina, I shouted. She didn't turn, didn't slow. She just pushed harder, practically throwing her shoulder into the glass door, as if her freedom were waiting on the other side. Sabrina barked louder this time, like the voice of a father who'd buried too much to stay quiet. She froze, and for a brief second, I saw something flicker in her posture. Not fear, not guilt, but irritation, like I was an inconvenience. Slowly she turned. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. Her eyes cold dark, calculating locked onto mine. "What do you want?" she hissed. "My husband is dying in there." I stepped closer, feeling the heat in my chest rise. A heat I didn't recognize. Not anger, not yet. Something deeper. A kind of grief wrapped in fire. "You're not going anywhere," I said, voice low, but sharp. "Not until you tell me what the hell you put in that coffee." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't put anything in. Stop." I cut her off, raising a trembling finger. "No lies. Not anymore." I saw the video. Her breath hitched. Just for half a heartbeat. But it was enough. Her whole act fell apart like cheap theater scenery. "Well then," she whispered, voice dropping its sweetness. "Entirely, I guess. You already know." I stared at her. This woman I had welcomed into my home, who had eaten at my table, hugged me at holidays, called me dad, with forced affection. "Why?" I demanded. It came out like a crack in my voice, a break I couldn't hide. "Why did you try to kill me?" She rolled her eyes. Actually, rolled her eyes. "Oh, James, don't be dramatic. It wasn't going to kill you." She crossed her arms. "Just weaken you. Weaken me." My voice shook. "Sabrina, Ethan could have died. That was his fault," she snapped, stepping closer. "He grabbed the wrong cup. He panicked. He always panics. I told him to pay attention." Her words hit me like blows. One after another, each carrying a truth I didn't want to face. "You were going to drug me," I whispered. She tilted her head, considering the accusation, as if it were a disappointing sales pitch. "It was supposed to make you confused, slowed down, vulnerable." Her voice sharpened. "We had the papers ready. The power of attorney. Signed. Stamped. All we needed was your shaky little hand on the final line. And trust me, you wouldn't have remembered a thing." My stomach twisted. Not from fear, from heartbreak. "You forged my signature," I said. She smiled. "Perfectly." "And the notary?" I asked, voice fading. "A friend. Or someone who owed us." "Doesn't matter now." I stared at her, unable to speak. She went on. She went on. "You really think $8 million belongs in the hands of a lonely old man who can barely climb stairs without wheezing?" she sneered. "Be serious. You weren't going to initiate. You weren't going to use it. You were going to die with it sitting in an account collecting mud." Her words were knives, cold, precise, thrust straight into the parts of me I'd spent years patching together. "You can't take it with you," she added. "And Ethan and I, we needed it. The debts, the house, the business failing. You had the money. You just didn't want to share." I swallowed hard, the burn rising in my throat. "Share, Sabrina." I raised Ethan. "I gave him everything I had." She scoffed. "Not enough." That stung. Worse than anything she said before. "And what about Ethan?" I asked quietly. "Did he know what he was doing? Did he know what that powder would do to me?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw the final truth. "He knew enough," she said. My chest tightened. Something inside me cracked like old lumber under too much weight. Then she took a step closer, her voice dripping venom. "You're old, James. Weak, alone. The world's moving on without you. We were doing you a favor, honestly, helping you transition, taking care of things for you. You should be thanking me." That was it. The final shove over the edge. Before I could respond, the doors behind her slid open with a mechanical hiss. Two police officers stepped inside, hands already resting near their cuffs. "Ma'am," one said calmly, "we need you to come with us." Sabrina spun around, eyes wide. No, you don't understand." He's confused. "That video is out of context. Ethan's sick. He needs me." But they didn't buy a word of it. Not after Reynolds had shown them the footage. Not after tracing the prescription history. Not after hearing her little confession right in front of me. "Sabrina Harper," the officer said firmly, "you're under arrest." When they clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, she whipped her head toward me, screeching, "This is your fault. You should have just let us help you." I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stood there feeling the last pieces of my illusion fall away. As they dragged her toward the squad car, her voice echoed through the lobby, shrill, furious, unhinged. And it hit me suddenly, painfully. This woman, this person I had allowed to orbit my family, had never seen me as a father, or a man, or even a human being. To her, I was just a wallet with a heartbeat, just a signature waiting to be forged, just a life waiting to be erased. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt old, and tired, and heartbreakingly human. The thing about truth is, once it cracks open, it doesn't stop spilling. It pours. It floods. It drowns everything in its path. Lies excuse the wall people build around their guilt. And for the next 8 months, that truth dragged all of us. Me, Ethan, Sabrina, my daughter Emily, into the long, exhausting, soul-bruising machinery of the American justice system. You don't really know someone until you watch them fight for their freedom. You don't know them until you watch them lie with their backs against a courtroom wall. Ethan and Sabrina lied in stereo. From the very first hearing, they pointed at each other like guns. His lawyer painted a picture of a broken man, manipulated by an ambitious, selfish wife. He claimed Sabrina threatened to leave him, said she forged the documents, said she bought the drugs, said she pressured him until he cracked under the weight. In one especially dramatic moment, his attorney even described Ethan as a victim of emotional entrapment. A victim. My son. The same son who stared straight into that chipped cup and stirred poison into it without blinking. Her defense was colder, sharper, like the woman herself. She claimed Ethan was drowning in debt, that he was the one who got in touch with a shady notary, that he purchased the sedatives through offshore contacts, that she was just a scared wife trying to keep her family together. She wept on cue, dabbed her eyes, just enough to look delicate, fragile. If I hadn't seen the footage, if I hadn't heard her confession with my own ears, I might have believed her. That's how convincing she was. But truth has a spine. And the spine of this truth was made of paper. Evidence. Pages and pages of damning evidence. The prosecutor revealed it piece by ugly piece. The text's long threads between Ethan and Sabrina. Discussions of dosage. Discussions of timing. Discussions of how she won't even know what day it is after this. The emails, drafts of forged documents, mock-ups of a family trust, an offshore account registered under a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The notebook, found in their house, Sabrina's handwriting filling the margins, timelines, contingency plans. Ethan's sloppy scrawl beside her notes, adding details, adjusting the plan, calculating potential profits. The forged signature sheet, my name written in perfect loops, not mine. The fake notary stamp bought online, illegal, identical to a real Ohio notary imprint. By the 3rd month of the trial, it wasn't a question of if they were guilty, only how guilty and how far they'd go to drag each other down. They snarled, they hissed, they contradicted each other with every testimony. A marriage collapsing under oath. 2 liars tearing each other apart in front of strangers. And me, sitting in the 2nd row, wishing none of it were real. My daughter, my Emily, calm as a lake at dawn, walked to the stand wearing a simple black dress and a look in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not fear, not grief. Clarity. The prosecutor asked only one question. "But Harper, Can you describe your relationship with your brother and Sabrina? Emily folded her hands, took a breath, and spoke the kind of truth that doesn't need volume to echo. I love my brother, she said. But loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of who they've become. Ethan hasn't been the son my father raised in a long time, and Sabrina has never treated my father as anything more than a stepping stone. She paused, scanning the room, each word sharper than the last. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was greed. Cold, calculated greed. And my father, lucky to be alive. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the judge lowered his eyes. Even the jury leaned forward. Even Ethan swallowed hard, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. For the first time, he seemed to recognize what he had truly done, not just to me, but to his sister. After 8 months, dozens of witnesses, and stacks of exhibits, the jury took less than 4 hours. The foreman stood, voice steady, face pale, for the charges of attempted poisoning, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. He handed the paper to the bailiff. The judge read it aloud. Guilty. On all counts. Sabrina didn't cry. She didn't scream. She went cold, stiff, like a statue carved from bitterness and fury. Ethan, my son, broke. His shoulders fell forward. His hand covered his mouth. He wasn't growling, not loudly. Just one quiet sob that barely escaped him. The judge didn't sugarcoat a thing. Sabrina received 6 years. Ethan received 4. The court, the judge said sternly, views the betrayal of a parent, particularly an elderly parent, as one of the most egregious violations of trust imaginable. He wasn't wrong, but hearing those words didn't feel like justice. It felt like loss, piled on loss. When the bailiffs approached, Ethan turned toward me. His eyes, once bright, once hopeful, were hollow now. All the arrogance, the greed, the entitlement had been washed away, leaving only a frightened boy I barely recognized. Dad, he whispered. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. It was the first honest thing he'd said in years, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. There are wounds deeper than words can reach. The officers led him away, handcuffed beside the woman who helped him plan my slow death. And as the courtroom doors closed behind them, I felt something which might surely give way. Not anger, not hatred, not even vengeance. Just a quiet, aching grief for the son I thought I had, and the man he chose to become. People talk about rebuilding like it's some clean, inspirational montage. New paint on the walls, new routines, a gym membership, a few deep breaths. But rebuilding after betrayal, after your own son tried to poison you, that isn't paint and gym passes, it's survival. One shaky day at a time. And that's what the next 5 years became for me. Not a comeback, not revenge, just learning how to breathe without flinching. Right after the trial, I walked out of that courthouse feeling older than 60. I felt 75, maybe 80, like grief added decades to my bones. But I had money, more than I ever dreamed of. And for the first time I realized money wasn't meant to be clutched, it was meant to be used. So I started small. The first thing I did was call Officer Reynolds, the man who saved my life, who stepped between a cup of coffee and a coffin. He answered the phone like he always did, with a calm, low Reynolds. I didn't dance around it. How much would it take to start that security firm you talked about last year? He laughed like he thought I was joking. He wasn't laughing 30 seconds later when I told him I meant every word. We sat down at a diner, eggs, black coffee, nothing fancy, and drew up the outline of Reynolds Protective Solutions, a private security firm specializing in hospital and elder safety cases. I told him, I'm not giving you a gift. I'm making an investment. Because good men deserve a chance. He shook my hand so hard my shoulder popped. but truth is helping him, helped me more. Loneliness hits differently after betrayal. I didn't want to fold into myself like a worn-out paper bag, so I looked for purpose somewhere outside my own skin. That's how the Linda Harper Foundation happened. It started with a single idea: no elderly person should suffer alone the way Linda did. We offered small grants for seniors living alone, transportation to medical appointments, grocery assistance, grief counseling, home repairs. Nothing flashy, just dignity. I named it after Linda because she spent her whole life caring for others. Her name deserved to live somewhere other than a headstone. And watching those first approval letters go out, I felt her hand on my shoulder again. Emily never once asked me for a dime. Not after the trial. Not after the sentencing. Not even when she quietly paid out of pocket to help Ethan's kids, my grandkids, navigate therapy. So I stepped in where I knew she'd never ask. I helped her and her husband buy their first home. Not a mansion. A warm, safe place in a quiet neighborhood where their daughter could learn to ride a bike and their son could play baseball in the yard. When Emily hugged me afterward, tight, trembling, I heard her whisper, "You're the father I got to keep." I didn't cry in front of her, but I did sit in my truck for 10 minutes afterward, hands shaking, letting the tears fall onto the steering wheel. My house on Maple Drive. It carried ghosts. Good ones mostly. Linda in the kitchen, humming old Fleetwood Mac songs. The kids arguing over breakfast cereal. Me and Linda dancing slow on the back porch during thunderstorms. But grief makes even good memories feel heavy. So I picked up a hammer. 50 years as an electrician taught me enough to do half the work myself. I replaced the roof, the one Linda always complained leaked during winter rains. I sanded the porch. I repainted the walls. I rebuilt the steps that had warped over time. And in the backyard, I planted Linda's garden. Roses, lilies, hydrangeas, the ones she used to press in books when she found a perfect bloom. Every morning I stepped outside with my coffee and walked the garden in silence. I swear some mornings it felt like she walked there beside me. Healing doesn't erase pain, but it does make room for courage. After 5 years, I finally found enough of that courage to visit Ethan. I didn't tell Emily. She would have worried herself sick. The prison visiting room smelled like metal bleach and stale air. The kind of smell that sticks to your clothes long after you leave. Ethan walked in, wearing state-issued khakis and a look I'd never seen on him before, eyes lowered, shoulders hunched, a man carved down to the truth of himself. He sat across from me. Didn't touch the table. Didn't try to smile. He just whispered, "Dad, you came." I stared at him for a long moment. Not angry, not forgiving. Just trying to see the boy I raised somewhere behind the man he became. "I didn't come to forgive you," I said quietly. "And I didn't come to blame you anymore either." He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "I just want one answer," I continued, voice steady. "Why?" He swallowed, hard, like the word itself was stuck in his throat. "I was drowning," he said. "I was losing everything. And I thought, if I could fix my life, I could fix myself. I told myself it wasn't really hurting you. I told myself you'd be fine. I told myself—" He shook his head. "I was wrong. About all of it. Sincerity. Real, seeking sincerity. The kind that comes only when a man has been stripped of everything but truth." I breathed slowly deep, measured the way my therapist taught me. And I told him the only thing I could tell a son who broke my heart, but once called me dad, with all the innocence in the world. "Try," I said, "to be the man your mother believed you could be." He cried then, quiet tears that slid down his face without sound. I didn't touch his hand. I didn't promise anything more. I just let him cry. Because some failures belong to the person who made them. And some healing you have to do alone. When I left, he whispered, "Thank you for coming." I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood caring doesn't mean carrying. That's what those 5 years taught me. You don't rebuild by forgetting the past. You rebuild by refusing to let it poison your future. 7 years. 7 full years had rolled by since the morning I scratched a $2 ticket and found myself holding a miracle I wasn't sure I wanted. A miracle that turned into a trial, a betrayal, a confrontation that nearly killed me, and somehow still led me toward a quieter version of life than I'd ever known. Peace doesn't come crashing in like a wave. It drips in slowly like a leaky faucet until one day you realize the sound doesn't bother you anymore. That's what those 7 years were for me, the slow settling of dust after a hurricane. And on a cool Saturday morning, the same kind Linda and I used to love, I realized I'd made it through. Emily had built a life that Linda would have bragged about to every nurse and neighbor in the county. She had a house with a wide front porch, a job she loved, 2 kids who adored their grandfather, and a husband who treated her like the backbone of their family. Most days I'd get a call from her on her lunch break, just to check in. "You good, Dad?" "I'm good, Em." "Promise?" "Promise." She never said it out loud, but I think she worried that the old shadows might creep back. Loneliness, fear, that ache of betrayal that doesn't completely fade even with time. But she didn't need to worry, not anymore. Reynolds Protective Solutions RPSS, as the logo proudly declared, had grown beyond anything either of us expected. What started as a 2-man idea in a diner booth had become a respected private security firm specializing in hospital protection, elder fraud prevention, and crisis intervention. He employed veterans, a few retired cops, and 1 nurse with a black belt in jiu-jitsu who could have taken down half the NFL. Every Christmas, he sent me a card that said, "Still watching over the ones who need it." Truth is, I think he's been watching over me too. And then, there was Ethan. He didn't move back home after prison. He didn't ask for money. Didn't ask for pity. He rented a small room above a woodworking shop 2 towns over. The owner, an old craftsman named Doyle McCain, believed in second chances the way priests believe in prayer. Ethan swept the floors at first, then learned sanding, then staining, then carving, then finally repairing antique pieces brought in by people who still believed good hands could fix old things. Some days when the shop was quiet, I'd drive over. He'd look up, wipe the sawdust off his arms, and say, "Dad, you want coffee?" And we'd sit on 2 stools by the window, drinking from mismatched mugs. Not talking about the past, not pretending the future owed us anything. Just 2 men trying. I didn't forgive him in one moment. Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a dimmer. It brightens slowly if you let it. And he never pushed. Not once. Maybe that's why it worked. On the 7th anniversary of the winning ticket, I drove to the same 7-Eleven on Brookside Avenue, where Linda and I used to buy our weekly chance at a dream. Not because I thought lightning would strike twice, but because some rituals keep the heart stitched together. The bell above the store door rang with that same old metallic chime. The place hadn't changed, same neon signs, same humming refrigerators, same smell of cheap coffee and floor cleaner. I walked to the counter, grabbed a single Powerball ticket, and slid 2 crumpled dollars across the surface. The cashier, a young guy with tired eyes, smiled politely. "Good luck today, sir." I chuckled. "Son, I already had my luck. Now I just keep the habit." I stepped outside into the soft sunlight and sat on the bench where Linda and I once shared pastries on Saturday mornings. The roses nearby were blooming deep red, big as teacups. I didn't scratch the ticket right away. I just held it between my fingers and watched the world move around me. Kids on bikes, a couple arguing, an old man trying to fit groceries into an overfilled trunk. A teenage girl crying into her phone. Life. Messy, raw, loud, ordinary life. And I felt grateful, truly grateful, for everything I still had, for everything I survived, for everything I rebuilt. People think money changes you. Maybe it does for some, but for me, it didn't rewrite who I was. It just stripped everyone else down to who they truly were. It showed me who loved me, who used me, who betrayed me, who saved me, who stayed, who deserved a second chance, who never did. But most of all, money revealed something deeper, who I still wanted to be. Not a victim, not a bitter old man, not a bank account waiting to be emptied. Just James Harper, a man who survived something dark without letting it turn him dark inside. A man who still bought a ticket every Saturday morning, not for hope of fortune, but to honor a love that shaped him more than betrayal ever could. Linda once told me during her last year, "You'll keep going, Jimmy. You always do. Just don't forget who you are." And sitting on that bench with a lottery ticket in my hand and a quiet, steady heart in my chest, I finally understood what she meant. Money didn't destroy my family. It didn't corrupt us. It didn't break us. It revealed us. And somehow, through all the poison, the lies, the courtroom, the years, it showed me who I still wanted to be. A man capable of choosing dignity over bitterness, mercy over anger, and life over fear. I slipped the ticket into my pocket, stood up, and took a long, deep breath. Another Saturday. Another chance to live clean. Then I whispered, "Thank you, Linda," and walked home.